is being
Nelson in the studio, my co-host, my brother from another. The doctor is in the house, here to give you a checkup from the neck up. Good morning, Dr. Bradley. How are you, sir?
Good morning. Good morning. This is a day that God made, and I'm so blessed that you allowed me to be here, Doc.
So much to talk about. You know, usually say, man, these 3 hours go by so fast. Today, you're gonna blink and it's gonna be gone.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because there is so much happening here in this world. So, good morning, Pastor Hobbs. How are you, sir?
Good morning, by the grace of God. I'm well.
Yeah. Before we get caught up in all that, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely.
Before he says anything, though, man, I want to let you know that I dig that hat.
Oh.
I mean, I come in every morning breathless with anticipation as to what this guy's going to have on, man. I mean, look at that hat.
America's Next Top Model.
Every morning,
he put
man.
the Q and G.
All right, brother.
Thank you. To God be the glory. God, we thank you for your grace. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for just being all powerful, for being all knowing and a very present help in the time of need. Father, we trust you as the author and finisher of our faith. So we release this broadcast and we release this day to you. Be glorified in and through all that's said and done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And with that said, we want to thank our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage Rate is located at 75 State Street in Boston, Mass. Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. And also, folks, like I said, today, April 9th, at Mamleo headquarters at 61 Columbia Road, Guaranteed Rate in conjunction with Mamleo will be providing free home buyer workshops there from 2 p.m. this afternoon. So stop by if you want. It's free. There's going to be some light refreshments served there. Like I said, you can give Mamleo a call at 617-436-6868. Just let them know you're going to be coming so they can prepare for the refreshments there. Also, so we make sure we have room. You don't have to pre-register, but like I said, give them a call. Again, it's today at Mamleo headquarters, 61 Columbia Road, with our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate Mortgage Company. Free first-time home buyer workshop. And folks, you don't have to have, excuse me, for folks to understand, Dr. Bradley, is that after 3 years, you're considered a first-time home buyer. So this isn't, if you already own a home, you've had your home for more than 3 years, you qualify as a first-time home buyer. So like I said,
that's interesting. Kind of talk about what we talked about earlier, isn't it?
Right.
That's nice to know.
Absolutely. So like I said, with that said, come on, stop by, like I said, and we'll make sure that we have room for you there. Also, want to say a hearty good morning to brothers and sisters, Brother Harry Scales and the brothers and sisters at Prince Hall up in beautiful Uptown Grove Hall there this morning. I say thank you, folks, for continuing that work tirelessly, getting the vaccinations into folks out there. Also, good morning to our sister Mary Franklin. I hope she's doing well. Also, Brother Jamal Crawford. I've been talking to my brother this week quite a bit. Hope he's well this morning as well. And Dr. Bradley?
Indiana, here we come.
Indiana.
To our brother Bridgeport. Indiana. I'm still waiting for that brother to call.
I know. I told you. He said he's going to. Folks, trust me, he exists. He is a real person. I've worked with him for several years. Yeah. He does exist.
Well, I live right down the hall from him over at Latin Academy, Latin school apartments over here.
Yeah, I remember when they turned those into high-end apartments.
Yeah, I used to live right down the hall from him. He used to come in with his MBTA uniform on. And I said, man, why don't you go be a real cop? Become a Boston cop. But he's good people.
Yeah, so good morning, Brother Bridgeport down there in Indiana as well. Dr. Bradley, a lot going on. I was asking you off air, have you heard, William Monroe Trotter? And I was shocked that you didn't know him, but he's a local here in Africa. So we're going to play a little him.
Actually, in fact, I wrote him down as one of the individuals that I would actually research and get to know a little bit more about him. No, I was not familiar with his story. I knew the guy. I knew the name, the school, and all that, but I'm not familiar with the story. So we would definitely correct that within the next 24 hours. Trust me.
I've seen the school. The Trotter School is located in Roxbury, and a lot of people walk by. It's amazing how we walk by things, we see things, and we don't make the connection. We just think, oh, the names. Even like I remember when I first got the book, The Street Names, and how many of them I just paid no attention to. Brother Rodney from the Nation of Islam had a book that they had published, which had the connection to the street names in Boston, and I like Dudley. These were also Humboldt. Yes, and I had no idea. Like I said,
slave owners.
You just see names on the figure. The city just picked the name and put it up there. And then,
there's some significance behind each name.
Right.
Usually it's because of some type of slave involvement or plantation ownership.
Yeah, so, we got a lot of work.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, Dr. I have to get your take on the confirmation this week of to be soon actually confirmed now and will be appointed once the retired justice retires in July, Ketanji Brown Jackson, her confirmation this week. All of the Democrats and Independents on one side of the aisle voted for her, and only 3 Republicans voted for her, which was expected. I mean, the Lindsey Graham, but I think what stood out for a lot of folks was the only black Republican senator in the Congress, in the Senate, is Tim Scott from South Carolina. And in the way he did it
was resounding, though.
Right.
I sat in my living room and I watched it on television, and after she was confirmed, I was very proud. I mean, I almost came to tears over it. But what really got me was two things. Number one, it amazes me how much history our senators, especially on the Republican side, tend not to know. Because they argued about her being a public defender, and they argued about her defending terrorists, and they're arguing about her defending people who actually killed Americans. And I'm sitting there, and I said to my wife, "Do these guys not know their history? Do they realize if they stop and think that that's a cornerstone of democracy, of justice in our democracy?" That's the first hit. The second hit is that here in the city of Boston, the Boston Massacre was what some people argue in the history that it was just they were using it because they wanted to get up the nerves to actually challenge the British. But the Boston massacre where British soldiers shot and killed American citizens, or at that time were British colonies. They were not Americans at the time. Was no such thing. But my point here is this: Samuel Adams, who was the cousin to John Adams, lobbied John Adams, who was actually went to Harvard. All right, lobbied him to defend the British. And his hit was, if we're going to have a criminal justice system that's fair, even the people that we think are guilty have to be defended. Well, and I'm saying, come on, guys.
Do you know the Supreme Court decision, Miranda versus Arizona?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is, right? Would you mind reciting that if you?
The Miranda one is, well, you challenge my memory, but you have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney if you cannot.
That's the piece I wanted. Right?
You cannot afford one. We've been pointed you.
No. That's the piece. What I wanted you to get out there. It's right there, right there. If you cannot afford one will be provided. You have a right to.
You have a right to an attorney.
You have a right to counsel. It's right in the counsel. Right there.
But yet you want to challenge. Now watch this. Now watch it.
For providing.
You want to challenge her. You want to deny her a seat on the Supreme Court because she provided a right that's actually well enshrined into our system. That's the
Supreme Court has ruled on.
The second thing here is that you just voted for an individual, Miss Barrett, who's a Justice Barrett, who could not recite the 5 basic rights under the First Amendment. So, I mean, dude, are you kidding me?
Right. But that's why I wanted you, I knew you as Arizona, Miranda, is that's a guaranteed right to counsel in this country. Regardless to what heinous crime you may have committed, even if it's not heinous, you have a right to counsel. And it says, it doesn't make it, if you can't afford it, it will be provided. Now, it may not be the best if it's for public, support.
But you have someone who's a little bit more erudite on the law than the person who's been
at least past the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
At least, and I'm not talking about the corner one.
He may have been low in the classroom, but he's passed the bar. Yeah, he's an attorney. Exactly. Or she's an attorney.
617-282-0685. 617-282-0685 is the call-in number. You're listening to At the Round Table with Ma'am Lynn. We're talking about the recent confirmation of Supreme Court nominee now will be a Supreme Court Justice, Associate Justice on the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first black woman to be elevated to that position. And we've had over 200 years, 115 of those folks, I believe, if 115 of them, 110 were white men. I mean, pretty much
the large majority of them were white men.
Large majority, in the 99 to 98 to 99 percentile, right? There's only been, she'll be the fourth woman on the court.
Well, if you have first of all, and I mentioned this earlier, the Supreme Court does not have an enforcement body. Right. I mean, one can argue that the various levels of law enforcement in our society will be an enforcement body for the Supreme Court. That's a legitimate argument. But my point here is this: when you have a court like the Supreme Court, which is the final step in the appeal process, the highest court of the land, the only court that's articulated in the Constitution, is the only one. It is in the best interest of our system for the people who are sitting on that court. That court is a high representative of the people that they're actually, serving.
Yeah.
So I would also argue there's a need for an Asian individual on the court, male or female, because that's the representation in our society. Right. So I think we have a ways to go. I think we took a good step, a very positive step in making a more perfect union. Right. But you can't have in your criminal justice system, this is what Samuel Adams was telling John, you cannot have a system that is going to be dominated by one group of people when the society is very, very diverse.
Right.
You can't. It just can't happen.
But also to that point, what I've learned over these confirmation hearings is that the Supreme Court has no oversight. Most justices are required, even at the appellate, to recuse themselves if they have
not Clarence Thomas, but go on.
No, but I'm saying the Supreme Court does not have those rules. No. All the other justices and all the other courts, if there's a conflict of the film, they're supposed to recuse themselves. The Supreme Court has no oversight whatsoever. That's what's really dangerous, because the Supreme Court really, Clarence Thomas and the Republicans, has made it very political.
Well, first of all, you can impeach a Supreme Court justice. Okay, it can happen.
Right.
I think, but at the Supreme Court level, the justice, him or herself, must say that they're going to recuse themselves. And Clarence, in all fairness to Clarence Thomas, he has done it before when his son was the school that his son goes to or went to was actually up for.
When it was so blatant. Yeah, when he thought. But I'm saying is that.
But he has done it. So you kind of give it.
He has tainted it. So bad with him now, because anything that he rules on from the January 6th, any of those cases that come before him, because his wife was so heavily involved, he just like with his son, he should have recused himself from this process, knowing that his wife's text messages would be contained in the information that they were going to be receiving. It was the only dissent.
Well, I think and the reason why one can argue the reason why he dissented was because he didn't want that information to be revealed that his wife's text message was
and
heavily
there's no way that he can convince any of us, that wasn't the case. I mean, when she even alluded to, I've talked to my best friend, and everyone knows
that's who
she refers to him as her best friend. So this is, it's just like I said,
you can't make it up, brother.
No, you can't.
You cannot make this up. But that's what we're dealing with today.
Right. I want to pivot back a little bit to, like I said, to Republican U.S. Senator Scott. So this is a back and forth. Joy Reid, who is the host of Joy Reid,
the Ride Out.
Right. Yeah, the Ride Out. So Republican U.S. Senator Tim Scott lashed out at MSNBC host Joy Reid after she claimed he only voted against Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation due to influence from white lawmakers. All accuracy here, not surprised by anything as Senator Scott does. He let Lindsey Graham and the sheriff's dog walk him and destroy police reform after pretending to work on it, and now he'll go along with Lindsey's barking dog racism against Judge Jackson because He's Tim Scott. Miss Reed said of Tim Scott on Tuesday. Right? And she goes on to say, Lindsay said it himself. It's fine to be black and have ambitions to rise in Lindsay, South Carolina, as long as you're conservative enough, meaning as long as you do and think what Lindsay and his clan tell you to. She continued. And she's right. Because look at who the Republicans now are trying to, get Herschel Walker now. They figure they have to try to find a black person to run against Argyle, the guy that's the senator down there, right, in Alabama, in Georgia.
Warnock.
Warnock, I'm sorry, yeah. Right. So you find Herschel Walker, you figure, he's got name recognition. What he's more known for these days from is the allegations of beating up his wives and his girlfriends.
And he's also, unfortunately, I think he has some mental issues there over years of football.
Right.
I haven't read this anywhere. I'm just looking at his mannerisms and the way that he's speaking.
Well, that would qualify him perfectly for the Republican Party. Right?
So I'm thinking that
there have to be a little mental along there these days.
He'll be primed to be manipulated by that leadership.
Right.
But I just don't understand why a person of color, and I expect I'm going to get a phone call on this one from Pastor Dan, of color would be even interested in being a Republican.
Right.
I just don't understand it because obviously they're not interested in the issues that are concerning me as a man of color.
Tom Cruise say in that movie with Jack Nicholson, I forget the name of the movie there, the movie, he said, you can't handle the truth. Right? A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Right? You can't handle the truth. And even the stance that, saying the 3 Republicans that voted for her confirmation, Romney and the 2 others, Murkowski and Collins.
Yeah.
There's no courage in that. There's no courage in doing the right thing. I mean, that wasn't courageous. It was not courageous to do the right thing.
I agree with you. The right thing is the right thing. But, to me, it just gives me the more resolve and the more impetus to get out and vote, regardless of the issues, regardless of the obstacles that they put before me.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that I pull that lever and vote them out of office, because that is what matters here. Again, I just don't see how a black person can subscribe to the platform of a Republican Party platform, because it just doesn't support us.
No,
in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Dan will call and give me another argument, but I just don't see how it support people that look like us.
No, you got it right. Let's hear from our callers early this morning.
Good
morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning, guys. Karen.
Good morning, Pastor Karen.
Good morning,
it's been a while. How are you?
Yeah, it has been a while. I'm just fine. How are you guys?
We're blessed, as Dr. Bradley said, blessed and highly favored.
Okay, so I called early because I got some stuff to do and I may get busy, and I didn't want to. I knew what you guys were going to be talking about today, and I just wanted to share some comments and some perspective.
Sure.
One, Herschel Walker is a clown. 2, it's sad that there are still people of African descent, African Americans in this country, who can't see that they're being used and think that there's something in this for them. But so be it. I felt disappointed and hurt for I can't think of her name, but if you remember during the in the early part of the confirmation hearings, they had people who were witnesses for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and against.
Yes.
And one of the women that was against her was a young black woman. I'm not sure she knows she's black, but she's black. Young black woman who came from Liberty University. As soon as she said Liberty, I said, oh, okay, got it, brainwashed. But what saddened me was not only that moment, but I wondered to myself, does this young, ambitious woman realize that her name is going to go down in history? As a black woman who voted against the first black woman that was nominated for the Supreme Court. And when she looks back on this moment, I wonder if she'll regret it.
Probably not, because she's probably been offered something. But, you just made me think about it. I remember when Anita Hill was testifying against Clarence Thomas, right? When he was being confirmed, the Republicans had put him up there. And he has really, in my opinion, been a disaster because, in my opinion, most of his opinions are politically motivated. It has nothing really to do with the law. and that he claimed that he was being a high-tech lynching. And if I don't, you remember that?
Oh my God!
And if that wasn't a modern-day version of what they did to Justice Jackson, I don't know what it is. I mean, she was overqualified. She's more qualified for most people than anyone that sat on the court.
Yeah.
She's definitely more qualified than Barrett.
Right.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
I mean, the individual who could not recite her 5 basic rights in the First Amendment, and she's a justice. I just don't understand the problem. But Tim Scott really also, Pastor Sharon, Tim Scott really hurt me in the sense that we're from the same part of the country, you know, and I can understand, you know, the pressure that you get from our people of color about in that part of the country about holding the rope and hanging on onto the rope. Yeah. But what happened to this brother, man? You know what I mean? What happened where you actually outright just vote resoundingly no against your I just don't understand it.
So, Pastor Karen, can I ask you how, because I was watching the Lawrence O'Donnell show last night, and he had some of her colleagues.
Her sisters.
Yes. Did you see that piece?
Yes.
That was just amazing. I watched that, and I was watching it with my daughter. I let her stay up late because I wanted her to see that and hear that, to understand it, and why, for me as a father of 2 young girls, that I know things are not equal as a black man, but even worse for black women. I want to get your personal take on how seeing this history and how that affects you, and seeing where we are in this country today.
So thanks for that segue, because that was my next point. That while I was enormously proud of her, and I just want to say, there's a universal black woman look, and several times she flashed it, and the look was, am I going to hand him his behind right now? Am I going to keep it together?
Right.
A universal black woman like that.
Right.
I got those looks many
Don't let
times.
this justice title fool you. The honorable means I still have a breaking point.
Right. These earrings can come off real quick. But so while I was enormously proud, almost immeasurably proud of her, I was saddened by the fact that she had to do that in order to get this seat. That she knows how to play the game. Right. She knew that that they were going to throw everything possible at her, and the pressure and the internal fortitude that she's probably had to deal with her entire career.
Yeah, exactly.
But in that moment, on not just national TV but worldwide TV, to be humiliated, to have her credentials questioned, to have her intelligence questioned, to have her faith. What was Lindsey Graham talking about? To have her faith questioned. The fact that she had to do that angered me.
Well, the fact
that she couldn't be judged on her own merit. Right. They had to come at her every different way, and then when they couldn't, they still slandered her.
Right.
So when her sister spoke last night, I got it immediately. I got it.
Right.
That's our sister.
Exactly.
We know she held it together. We knew she could do it. But why was she required to do it like that?
Well, 2 points to what you're saying. One is that, the hypocrisy, because Lindsey Graham was one of the few that voted for her to be on the appellate court with the same issues that he was raising for her position. And that's the second highest court in the land that she was serving on. So if you had questions or concerns, that would have been the time to raise them. You didn't. This was a political theater, and even his statement in the beginning, well, we're not going to do to you what they did to Amy Coney. Yes, you did. Right. And he thought that if he put it out there that he was a racist in his first statement, that you can't call me a racist because I'm telling you that I'm
a racist.
All right. But the other thing I think that doesn't,
I'm calling myself a racist.
Right. That in my opinion, I was talking to Pastor Hobbs on the way in, is that this was designed. They knew that her credentials were impeccable, but what they wanted to leave her with is bloodied up in the sense that it wasn't her qualifications, it was her skin color, right? That she's not qualified for the position, that she's only an affirmative action pick, and that's what bothers me a lot, because this is the how they want to define her, that she's not qualified. She's more qualified than anyone that's currently sitting on the bench, and that as listening to her sisters last night and what they've continued to go through as black women, and here we are in 2022. I was talking to Dr. Bradley. I said we're rolling back they're coming after people. And so whatever the side of the aisle you stand on, as far as abortion rights, voting rights, and those things, I said these are rights that the courts have ruled on, and they call them Desarius Nices. I may be pronouncing it wrong. That this is settled law, and now we're rolling back to the point where they want to be able to sue you if someone is reading a book that you don't approve of in your child's class in states around the country. That's that slippery slope where they're starting with rights, because even women's rights protection, it has to be renewed every 5 years, just like voting rights for black people. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, who is it to say that these folks get to decide when my rights expire?
Well, I don't see how we can argue free when you're going to tell me exactly when I can and cannot have a baby. I mean, I don't
when
see
you can't have one.
When I can't have one. You can tell me, my wife, if my daughter's raped, you're going to tell me she cannot get an abortion. Right. How am I free? Right. I don't get it. Maybe I'm losing something here. You know what I mean?
No.
You know? So I just think government is becoming too involved in our bedrooms, in our kitchens, in our living rooms. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, Pastor Karen, before we let you go, because we're going to play this piece, you work at the William Monroe Trotter School, right?
I used to.
You used to, right? That's what I'm saying. So I was just telling Dr. Bright we're going to play this piece, and I hope you can listen off the air. Is that he was an amazing individual. I was listening to this NPR piece, and then we're going to play a portion of it on this segment, and then at the top of the hour. But I did not know, and I passed that school every day because I work right down the street at Latin Academy. I did not know anything really about him. I just thought they named the school. Didn't even know who William Monroe Trotter was. But I started researching his history after I learned this piece, and I mean, we need some William Monroe Trotters today is my point I'm trying to make, because we're in trouble here. No, we're in trouble here. So
my last thought is, and this is like related, not related. So I'm always, Dr. Bradley might be able to relate to this, Pastor Hobbs, I don't know. I'm always trying to figure out, so here we have a moment with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and then juxtapose that to what's going on in the Ukraine. And I'm always trying to figure out what God is saying to the world.
Amen.
Because even though it's a war taking place in the Ukraine, what's God saying to the world about this? And so, to me, it's no coincidence that at a time when this long-standing democracy seems to be going in the wrong direction, you have a group of people who have tasted freedom and are willing to die for it.
Hello.
And just like with the pandemic, I don't believe that caused the pandemic. He allowed it, but he caused it. And I really think one of the purposes of the pandemic, one of many, was to show people our heart. Because suddenly we cared about the Walmart worker and the grocery, packer, or
marginalized forever, right?
But at the same time, we were hoarding toilet paper and didn't care whether you had toilet paper to wipe your behind or not.
Right.
And so again, I always think like, okay, he's giving us opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to say, look inside, y'all. Right. Look at who you've become.
Right. But I think it's also where history repeating itself, right? Because you look at Putin, and it just reminds me of what I've read about Hitler, right? And then
my God,
right, with Lindsey Graham and them, and what I read about George Wallace and those folks, right? And so we're seeing just a modern day version of it. And folks, they said they think that some people have gained too much, like you said, and once you've tasted freedom, so that's why I said I think that they don't understand that there are those of us who taste freedom and we understand what our ancestors went through, and I will not, and I'm saying this only, I will not go back to those days of being treated as a second-class citizen in this country. I'm not looking for anyone's acceptance.
You know what?
Larry, we may just have to fight for that.
Absolutely.
We may just have to fight. Okay, guys.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Thank you.
I think there's a relationship between America's questioning of democracy and the presidency of Barack Obama. I think at that point, democracy in America, in particular white America, started to be kind of teetered, kind of tattered, I should say, not tattered. And I think a large part of the controlling group kind of wish for autocracy. You know, and especially on the far right, you'll see that in the Lindsey Grahams. You'll see that, you know, in the Steve Bannons. Right. At one point, those people have been identified and labeled as communists if they spoke like they're speaking today. So I think there's a relationship between Barack Obama and the Americans' uncertainty about democracy. And I do agree with Pastor Sharon when she said that you have people over in Ukraine who's willing to die for freedom.
They had a taste of
it. But the hit here is that those individuals, in terms of their society, are predominantly white.
European, right? Because we've had atrocities in other countries.
Exactly. And in America, you have this diverse group of a very diverse society, and out of that diversity is one controlling group, white men, who reigned in leadership. And now that has been broken, that ceiling has been broken, and now people are a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of democracy. Anyone can win that office.
Right, but that's also why you see Mitch McConnell, when he the other day when he was questioned about would he support Donald Trump if he was a nominee, he said yes he would, because all he was concerned about Donald Trump is the useful idiot, is that what Mitch McConnell was more interested in is packing the courts.
Exactly.
And that's what he spent most of his time, was not legislation but packing the courts, because if they get their folks on, they realize it's not the Senate that holds the real power. These are folks who are appointed for lifetime, have no accountability. If we can get them on our side, game over. Checkmate.
So I think you know, at some point democracy tends to correct itself though, and I'm hoping that happens. But right now, I really think democracy as we know it in America, this representative republic that we have, it's really
it's fragile.
It's fragile, very, very fragile. You know, and I'm afraid that it might fall apart if we're not careful.
It's falling apart. You know. Speaking of which, Pastor Haas, when you're ready, we're going to listen to a little piece of this William Monroe Trotter from NPR this week.
To Americans today, but he built a national following in his time as a fierce advocate for the full citizenship rights promised former slaves after the Civil War. Trotter organized mass protests, confronted presidents, and openly challenged leaders such as Booker T. Washington, who took a more cautious approach to black empowerment. Greenwich's new book is called Black Radical. Also, Justin Chang reviews Promising Young Woman and Pieces of a Woman, 2 new movies available for streaming. The protests for racial justice that swept through the country last year found support among many Americans, and they also reignited old debates about how militant activists should be and how far they should go in seeking social change. Are peaceful marches the best approach, or is mass civil disobedience, even violence, called for? Do demands like defunding the police turn off potential allies and undermine prospects for reform? Our guest today, historian Cary Greenidge, has a book about an African-American activist and newspaper editor of another era. He fought uncompromising battles for civil rights in the early 20th century, at times earning the scorn of black leaders committed to more gradual, reformist approaches to change. His name was William Monroe Trotter, and while running his weekly newspaper, The Guardian, in Boston for decades, he organized massed protests, confronted presidents, and pressed hard for federal laws to stop lynchings and to ensure the voting rights and full citizenship promised African Americans after the Civil War. Greenidge's book is a gripping read, an account of Trotter's life and of African American activism in the Jim Crow era. Cary Greenidge is an assistant professor in the Department of Studies in Race, Colonialism, and Diaspora at Tufts University. Her book, Black Radical, The Life and Times of William Monroe Trotter, was published last year. It's out in paperback this week. She joins me from her office at Tufts. Cary Greenidge, welcome to Fresh Air. You know, I had never heard of William Monroe Trotter, probably like a lot of our audience. Sounds like he was about as prominent as Martin Luther King in his day. And I read in the acknowledgments you first heard the name from your grandfather. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, thank you first for the introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. I grew up in New England. I was born in Brooklyn, but I'm a, Black New England person. My family has been here for, generations, and both of my maternal grandparents were activists during the 1950s and 1960s in the South End of Boston. And by the time I was born, my family had moved to the suburbs, and my grandparents were still involved in activist work in the 70s and into the 80s in Boston, despite the fact that they lived in the suburbs. And so I can remember very, very clearly being sick, being in my grandparents' home in the suburb of Boston, and my grandfather was watching the television, and he saw a retrospective on TV about busing in Boston. One of those sort of anniversaries of the horrible time in 1974 when the city of Boston erupted in protests over court-ordered desegregation of the public schools. And he was watching this, and I remember him just saying as an aside, kind of probably just to himself, that if William Monroe Trotter was there, none of this would have happened. And I remember immediately thinking, well, who is that person? And getting up and going to my grandmother, and my grandmother writing it down on a piece of paper for me, the name, and showing me a book that came out in the late 1960s, early 70s called The Guardian of Boston. And she showed me the book, and she said that Trotter was a race man, this sort of an old term that older Black people often use to refer to activists of a different generation. And she said he was a race man and that he was an activist. And I sort of stored that in my memory. And then when I went to college and went to grad school, I began to wonder what had happened to Trotter and why it was that our understanding of him as scholars and really the consciousness we have about Black protest, why it was that the story that was told about him seemed to lack depth, the story being that he was secondary to the freedom struggle. And so that's really where I came to approach Trotter before I even went to graduate school.
And you found a really deep and interesting story. When Trotter was active in the early 20th century, in some ways like now, it was a time when many African Americans felt an urgent sense of needed social change. And people didn't always agree on how to get there. That's a lot of what we read in the book. And your book was written before George Floyd's tragic death and the demonstrations that followed. But as you researched this, were you thinking about activism and what lessons this would offer for how to pursue social change?
Well, yes, I was really thinking and approaching, as I try to do with all of my work, what it is that politically shapes a community, specifically African and African-descended people. How do people come by the politics that they have? And specifically, this whole idea of the Black radical tradition, which is this long tradition in the Atlantic world. And so how do people come to embrace that? And why is it that communities often valorize those people once they are gone, but during their lives, those people are often marginalized in the public consciousness? And so I was really thinking of it from that end and thinking of it from a protest end, but also taking this idea that radical protest is not simply for a changing of laws, although Trotter definitely believed in that. It's really for a reconceptualization by Black people themselves on how they see their power in the world. And so I really wanted to sort of go deeply into this community, go deeply into Trotter and how it is that Trotter was galvanizing a community that most people, including some leaders of the community, thought of as having very little political power.
Yeah, Trotter spoke to working and poor Black citizens, organizing them, wanting them to feel the power they held with coordinated mass action. But he himself was among the wealthiest and best educated Black people in Boston. Tell us a little about his background.
Oh, sure. So William Monroe Trotter was born in 1872. He's born in Chillicothe, Ohio. His father, James Monroe Trotter, was a lieutenant, one of only a handful of Black lieutenants in the Union Army. His mother was born between the family farm in southern Ohio and the slave state of Virginia. And his father, James Monroe Trotter, for his exploits in the Civil War, was awarded a position as head of the Federal Post Office in Boston and moved to Boston in 1868, and Trotter was born in 1872. And so he grew up in a household that was decidedly upper middle class. His father was also a writer and a music promoter, and his father eventually was appointed to Recorder of Deeds in Washington, D.C. by President Grover Cleveland in the 1880s. So Trotter came from a lifestyle, a childhood of much privilege, and he graduated from high school, grew up in a predominantly white area of what is now Hyde Park in Boston, but back then was a suburb, and attended Harvard University. He was a brilliant student, never ranked below third in his class, graduated in 1895, got an inheritance from his father that was worth about $20,000, and in today's money, that's a stupendous amount of money, and really was content to become a real estate broker. But then began to see that the ways in which racism, particularly entrenched, institutionalized racism of the 1890s, prevented that from happening. He was one of the most prominent and popular students at Harvard's campus, yet he couldn't get a job anywhere with his Harvard degree. His father had known all of these directors of like the National Bank of Commerce and white liberal bigwigs in Massachusetts, and he couldn't get them to call him back. And so Trotter really began to reevaluate and look at, well, what did it mean to be, quote unquote, a successful black man at a time when that success really bore little material rewards due to the racial structures that existed. And so he founded The Guardian in 1901, and basically until his death in 1934 poured his own money and his family's money into keeping the weekly alive. And that attracted a population of African Americans and African descended people, not just in Boston, but really across the country, who were really looking for a newspaper, a weekly that spoke to their demands.
Right. When he started the paper, The Guardian, 1901, and the Jim Crow era was really taking hold. And one of the things that motivated him was his frustration with Booker T. Washington, the leader of the Tuskegee Institute, who was perhaps the best nationally known African-American leader, perhaps at least among whites. They had drastically different perspectives on the problems facing African-Americans. Just tell us a bit about their backgrounds and how it shaped their perspectives.
Yeah, so I always say this, my worry when I was writing the book with my editor was that, Booker T. Washington, I didn't want him to come across in this narrative as a villain. I really wanted him to come across as somebody who had this counter narrative of blackness and black American history and white racism than Trotter had, and that most black people experience. So Booker T. Washington was born enslaved in Western Virginia. He grew up in a time right at the end of the Civil War when there's sort of immense racial violence across Western Virginia and Virginia. He eventually attended Hampton Institute, which was one of the schools founded in the aftermath of the Civil War during Reconstruction, and he really had ambitions. Washington had ambitions to become an attorney, and he was approached by a white general who was the head of much of the educational building after the Civil War, named Samuel Chapman Armstrong. And Armstrong really had a very specific belief on the potentials for both African Americans and for Native Americans. He really believed that they needed to work, that they needed to be wedded to the idea of labor, and that would then lead to their rights eventually being rewarded through the political system. And so Washington came underneath Armstrong's influence. Armstrong basically offered Booker T. Washington to become head of a school that was just beginning called the Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama, and he sends Washington out there in the 1880s to build up this institution. And so to Washington's credit, he created an institution, Tuskegee Institute, that became the most institutionally powerful black organization in the South at the time, and became the one route to higher education that most black people in the Jim Crow South had at the time. And so he was president of Tuskegee, but through that he became much more. He wielded a lot of political power, if not influence. And so one of the reasons he was able to do this was the way that Washington spoke about white racial violence, in which he really believed that white racial violence, lynching, was the result not of white racism, but of black backwardness and a need for black people to work and get educations. And so this really flew in the face of what Trotter knew, but also to Trotter's chagrin, it really flew in the face of what most black people experienced. And so when Trotter started The Guardian, he really wanted to tap into the fact that although Washington had done much for education in the South, Washington had really become somebody who was, as Du Bois said, a leader of two races, not one. He really had to walk this fine line between support for the white racial regime in the South and support for his people. And Trotter would say, and the historical record would say, was that he failed in the latter point.
In 1903, Booker T. Washington comes to Boston to give a speech at the National Negro Business League. Trotter goes to the event. Tell us what happens.
One of my favorite events to research, probably because it's the event that is most identified with Trotter, at least in Boston history. Trotter, by 1903, had formed a group that he called the National Equal Rights League, or the Boston Suffrage League. They went by both names. And this group was of black people in Boston and New England who really thought that voting rights and enfranchisement should be the one issue that black communities and black organizations rallied behind. And he was really critical of this National Negro Business League, which professed itself to be a business organization, but also professed that it did not have political machinations in either way. And so throughout 1902 and into 1903, Trotter and his league would show up at meetings that Booker T. Washington held through his Afro-American Council. They were always rebuffed. They were always told that they couldn't speak. And so finally, Booker T. Washington came to Boston for his league meeting in the summer of 1903. Trotter showed up at the meeting and demanded to read the questions that Trotter posed to Booker T. Washington that had been addressed to Washington through the black community. So over months, Trotter had met with black Bostonians, asked them if they could ask Booker T. Washington anything, what would it be? They came up with all these sort of questions about questioning his leadership, questioning his, what was termed then, race pride. And so Trotter stood up and asked these questions, and a scuffle ensued, a riot in school, and Trotter was arrested, and he served 30 days in prison for disturbing the peace.
Wow. So what was the effect on Trotter's reputation and national recognition?
Well, the W.E.B. Du Bois called him the John Brown of this movement, that this was kind of a moment in which many people, black people, might have disagreed with the outcome, but many people also applauded the fact that he had the courage to stand up to someone who was believed to be a leader of black people, but that many black people themselves, particularly in the North, had issue with. And so his reputation exploded, particularly amongst working class black people across the country, but also black middle class, this burgeoning black middle class outside of the South, that really supported this idea that Booker T. Washington did not represent the needs or the desires of the black community.
Booker T. Washington is obviously not happy with being challenged in this way, but he had his own connections to black newspapers, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Booker T. Washington did brilliantly was that he really tried to control the message about himself, Tuskegee, and the black community. And one of the things Washington did was with his money, and he was getting money from sort of wealthy.
All right, we're going to take a pause and then we're going to talk about dive into a little bit. You're listening to At the Round Table with Mamleo. The calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. I'm your host, Larry Ellison, in studio with my brother, my co-host from Dr. Bradley. That William Monroe trial.
Well, he sounds like a very interesting individual, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm actually going to buy her book.
I already ordered.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put that, get that on.
Black Radical.
I am definitely going to buy that. My wife went to the Trotter School. Now that I think about it, in grade school, very interesting history here, and I'm enjoying it. I can definitely. I have my issues as I went through Booker T. Washington's life and research him. I have the same issues that he's putting out here. It's like this guy seems to be more of an accommodationalist, an individual who just go along to get along. I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with what I'm reading, and so it's kind of nice to have that reaffirmed when I read it, when as I'm listening to her. Right. Sounds like it's going to be a very good read.
It is, but also to their point, Dr. Bradley. if you look back in history, this is just a modern day version, right? We still have some of those folks today who want to placate, and then there are folks
Tim Scott's
that's what I'm talking about, right? And then there's folks like us who are willing to push the envelope and challenge it and say, no, this cannot stand.
Exactly.
And to think about it, the courage to have it back then, that they're starting. I mean, like, I wouldn't compare the two, but The Guardian, the newspaper that he started, here was someone who had influence as a black person back then. There were very few, but he still couldn't get his foot in the door in places, even with his influence, right, because he was black.
But that goes to the point when a couple of broadcasts ago, I talked about being well educated, but not having the opportunity, not given the opportunity. So you can have all the education. And here's a man who's never ranked below 3 in his class at Harvard, but could not get a job.
Exactly.
And not because he's not intelligent, it's because he's black.
Well, the same thing with Judge Jackson, right?
Yes.
It's your intelligence. This is why I say it's not what you know, but who you know. Yeah. And if we haven't been in that arena enough to know who to know, or they don't know us well enough.
Well, how little have we changed?
That's the point, right? But think about the courage and back in the 1800s there, right? For him to have that courage to challenge it in a system where, like I said, lynchings were still going on. And today, people cower and doing nothing.
When they don't have to.
Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is T. Michael Thomas from the People's Academy.
All right, good morning, T. Michael.
I love this segment. I know it's a great show, and I'm always listening, and they're all great, but this one in particular...
Caught your fancy. Right. Well, it's another segment. We're gonna, like I said, it's a long, and I felt it was so important to play it in its entirety. That's why I couldn't fit it all in this. We're gonna play it at the top of the hour to finish it. And I love when callers like yourself, and that's what we're here to try to inform, because they say those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And that's what we're doing here. It's like, wow, we had fighters back then, and it was a lot harder to fight. You're one of those fighters today, right? Trying to get equality for people that look like you, and the pushback a lot from folks that look like us.
Now, Larry, I'm glad you said that, because I was watching the news this morning, and the mayor was asked a question about these SUVs, the motorcycles, the illegal bikes. And she used that. She skated around, and I hope her supporters and her advocates is listening, because she talked about basically solutions on we need more programs for these youths and blah blah blah. But why are you and your whole team and your supporters refusing to do a sit down with the People's Academy, who we're out in Brockton training some folks from Boston, but the majority is from Brockton?
Well,
but you're supporting, you're meeting with everyone else. You know of the People's Academy. The folks are in your administration. I'm reaching out to folks. No callbacks. It's okay. But don't get on the news and talk about programs, and then you're not addressing a program that could create billions and billions of opportunities for individuals.
I couldn't agree more. That's what I'm saying. I hear a lot of talk, but I don't, and I hear a lot of programs. Like you said, there was a woman. She was in Lowell. She resigned as the director of equality because she said it gave her a job, but it really wasn't a job to change anything, and she resigned from it because she wasn't going to be a part of some scam. And that's what happens, is that they give a person that looks like us a position, and it looks like a powerful position, but no real authority and no real power to change anything. T. Michael, stand by. We got another call we're going to take because we're coming up close to the top of the hour. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Hey, good morning. God bless you, brothers. How are you doing?
Good morning, Bishop.
Is this Bishop Dickerson?
Wow, we must really struck the chord.
We must have really struck something. Man, how you doing, Bishop?
What did you say?
We must have really struck a chord this morning. How you doing, bro?
No, in a good way, brother.
Okay.
Listen, man, I appreciate brothers like you all, because you remind others who have drifted away from their heritage that it's a good thing to be black in this city and to promote things that are going to advance our people. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Amen.
And what I think about from a modern perspective, when you was talking about Trotter, and I know you mentioned, I heard the discussion that was mentioned about Trotter, but also Booker T. Washington.
Yes.
You know, but see, right now, today, and what frustrates me, right, is that we have so many black people in positions to help their own people.
Amen.
But when they get an opportunity to advance, you know, like, okay, the different ethnic groups, when they climb the ladder, you know, they keep pulling people up. But it seemed like when black Americans in particular climbed the ladder in Boston, they pulled the ladder up.
Right, exactly.
and no one's hanging on to the ladder when they pull it up.
Right.
There's no one holding on to it.
Now, who was the caller that was just before me?
T. Michael Thomas. T. Michael.
Yeah. That brother does great work.
Yeah,
I thought he was making the connections that he needed to make. I haven't.
No, he's still not getting the support. Right.
That's not good. That's not good. Maybe I'll get his number from one of you guys.
Sure.
He's definitely one that I've known to be consistent over the years, and you know, in terms of like the construction trades and stuff like that. You know, and so I'm surprised because last time I was talking to him. He was talking about a project that they were working on. I think it was in Dorchester. Yeah. But anyway, brothers like him should have the support from the political leaders, but also from the black leaders that are in the community as well, that may have some influence in regards to making the connections. And I try my best to connect the dots as much as possible, but sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that we should continue to push the envelope, like you said earlier. And I appreciate you, Dr. Bradley, and you, Larry Ellison, and all the brothers in the community that really take time to pull somebody else up, because so many criticism, so much self-hate and projection on other people in a negative way. You know, that is not good. And I think in order for us to make a difference in this city, we're going to have to pull together. Absolutely. And even if we don't particularly like each other, we're going to have to pull together, because everyone, you know, political leaders, anyone respect numbers and unity. You know,
absolutely. Amen. Bishop, thank you, sir. We're coming up on our break. Appreciate it. T. Michael, thank you, gentlemen, for calling in.
God bless you all.
Continue to listen, please. Thank you. T.
Have a wonderful time Sunday.
Thank you.
You too.
All right, T. Michael, Bishop Dickerson. Wow, you know, good to hear from him and Pastor Carey. I feel like we've been blessed this morning with our spiritual leaders. Folks, we're going to take our required break. T. Michael, thank you, sir. We're going to take our break, Dr. Bradley, and then we're going to continue the second part of the interview.
Interesting to hear this, man.